Senate Bill 423. Would you like to provide additional context on that?
Absolutely. So this is Senate Bill 423 from Senator Weiner. It was first heard in Senate Housing and Governance, Senate Housing Committee. Got out. It's going to be heard in Senate Governance next week. In a nutshell, 2017 SB 35 was passed, signed into law. SB 35 had a sunset. This bill, SB 423, eliminates the sunset of what was SB 35, authorizes SB 35 to apply in coastal zones, subjects local governments to SB 35 streamlining if they fail to adopt a compliant housing element as determined by HCD, provides that if a local government requires units restricted to higher incomes than those required in SB 35 streamlining, then those units meet the affordable housing requirements, authorizes development on a wetland or protected habitat if authorized by any other state or federal law, and then kind of just the last point of importance, requires a local government planning director or other equivalent local government staff to make determinations about compliance with the objective planning standards. There's a couple of others, but that's kind of the high level, boom, right there, here you have it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members who wish to comment or ask questions about Senate Bill 423? Member Priforce.
So it is the position of the League of California Cities to oppose this bill, and I stand with the League of California Cities. SB 423 is incredibly toxic. This is a Weiner bill that allows to build upon his campaign, completely financed by the big real estate. Once again, we go back to big real estate and YIMBY. This bill, when it comes to I don't even know how to begin. So, okay, the coastal cities. One of my favorite images that's being circulated around the web is a coastal city where you have a field of single zone homes, and there's a 50-foot tower there. And this is the kind of thing that this does. And if a community decides to not want to build it, this bill is the one that is the most punishing towards communities, towards towns, and towards city. Whether it's the limiting the affordable housing to down to 10%. When it comes to new projects, or when it comes to that many of us know of Emeryville's RENA numbers, and that we're going to try to meet the RENA numbers, and that the builder's remedy kicks in even when you have it planned. You still haven't funded it, but you have it planned that you're going to build a housing. But if you haven't built it yet, the builder's remedy kicks in. 423 is a bill that is that a lot of people are around the state are vehemently opposed. It is extremely controversial, and I oppose this. And thank goodness that the League of California Cities also agrees with me.
Others who wish to comment on SB 423? Member Mora.
So I don't think it's news to anybody that the state of California has an acute housing crisis. In short, we just haven't built enough housing. Unfortunately, Emeryville is too small to make a dent in the housing stock in California. But on the state level, if we can get other cities to do their part, and support this bill and get them to build the housing that they should be building, that they should have been building for decades, then we would not have this housing crisis, which has led to a homelessness crisis. It's linked to environmental crisis. So for that reason, I think we should wholeheartedly support this bill.
Vice Mayor Welch.
So there's an environmental impact report from July of 1978 that was done by the planning department of San Francisco that they had developed, discussing the potential downzoning that would actually happen 2 months later. And it predicted that massively reducing the allowable amount of housing would result in displacement of low to moderate income households, make a negative impact on air quality and would be through pushing people into longer commutes. And that was just one city. One city was able to impact an entire region. And we know that even 7-8 years before, Oakland and both Berkeley had their own different ordinances that also allowed downzoning in their own cities. So we've got 3 cities just in the region that decided to downzone now 50 to 45 years ago, and now we see what type of crisis we're in. We weren't building to demand, and now we have an impact socioeconomically. It is extremely difficult for not just low-income people to live here, moderate-income people also are barely able to survive and live here as well. And this is predicted 50 years ago. This is their own planning department predicted 45 years ago that what we're seeing today was going to be the exact thing that was going on. Our air quality is impacted. Low to moderate income households, elderly households cannot live here anymore. And that was just one city. And let's be clear about why some cities don't want to have streamlining, why they want things like local control. Local control just isn't about designing what your city looks like, it's also designing who gets to live there. If you downzone and you're only building a certain type of housing, in this case it's single family housing, that means you're saying only people who can afford to live in single family homes are allowed to live here. And if you can't afford it, too bad, get out of Dodge. We don't care. Now you're allowed to come here and work here. We can extract your labor from you. You can provide the amenities to our communities, but you can't also live here and be a beneficiary of those amenities, of that growth, of that prosperity. You need to go somewhere else. And that to me sounds like that sounds very similar to me of another institution where it extracted labor from people, but then they weren't able to get the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Others who wish to comment? Member Priforce?
So, folks, notice what my colleagues are saying. Notice how affordable housing didn't really come up. And we've been talking about affordable housing for a while now. 10%. It limits the amount of affordable housing that we can require from new developments. This is about streamlining and pushing for more housing to be built faster. You remember Sarah Palin when she would say, drill, baby, drill? Well, this is build, baby, build. That's all this is. Big real estate, big pharma, big oil, it's the same thing. Folks, this is about money. That's what it comes down to. It's about money and getting money into the hands of developers faster and making sure that they are able to place this place this on the backs of cities. And it's important that State Senator Glazier, he said that one of the problems is that cities don't have enough power. Cities don't have enough power in Sacramento. That we're weak, and these are the kind of bills that makes us weaker. And so, and then when I think about cities being weaker, I think about the people being weaker. And so this is just, if you want to know the bill, just look at the author, right? This is the interest in here is more about fattening pockets than it is about actually building housing, because you can't say in one breath that we're promoting affordable housing, and then another breath said, oh well, we just want more housing, period. And that's the thing. If we're talking about housing supply or economics, so this is all about trickle-down housing anyway. So if 100 units, and we're limited to 10%. So let's say 10 units out of 100, right? And so let's say you have 10 projects. Then how many non-affordable units are being built out of 10 projects, and how many affordable units are being built out of those 10 projects if it's just 10%? Can you see how if you're actually providing all this supply, because that's what I'm hearing is supply side progressivism, all this supply, and that the supply will actually bring down the numbers, then the numbers actually are being brought down for those luxury market rate housing. It's not being brought down for the affordable housing. And then we could use transportation. We could use all these different things as an excuse as to why we have the affordable housing crisis in the first place. You can't go to the person who poisoned your lake and ask them for the cure. Going back to developers who intentionally shortened the amount of homes being built, that these are the same folks who fight against vacancy rates. I mean, even if you looked at like a city like LA and you compared the amount of vacancies as opposed to actually housing, so it's not about housing or even about homelessness. And we all know that homelessness is so much more about just housing. That homelessness is a very complicated issue, and that issue can be addressed if we actually build homes for the homeless, not building homes for luxury upzoning and market rate housing. I'm from Brooklyn and I see the game and I recognize it and I'm not with it. And hopefully the people are behind me. I mean, it's going to vote, of course, a different way than I am, but we'll see how the people respond to 423 in the future. Thanks.
May I ask you a question? Member Priforce.
Well, I didn't know we could do that. Is that in the rules? We can ask each other questions?
Well, yeah.
Okay,
about your statement. I just want to understand. I am interested in a couple of things you said. So, with respect, and I'll ask staff just to make sure I have my facts right before I ask my question. So, the project we had earlier on the agenda tonight, 3600 San Pablo.
That's right.
That was an SB 35 project, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the rents for the first 30 or 45 units of the building were $500 to $800, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so my question is, I heard you say that we need to give more power to cities to solve this, and that this is essentially just a way for large, wealthy developers to make profit off of what goes on in communities to build housing. I guess I have a couple questions. Do you believe that we have a housing shortage?
Yes. I believe that we have a housing shortage. I believe we have a housing crisis, especially as it relates to black and brown home ownership. This bill is not about black and brown and Asian home ownership. This is about rentals all across California, a rental state.
And so my second question is, how would you propose, let's say that the bill doesn't become law and SB 35 expires. Like, what are you or the League of Cities or whomever is advocating against this and saying we need to leave this in the hands of local control? What is the proposal for how homes are going to be provided to the homeless?
In answer to your question, this doesn't solve it.
I understand that's your position. I'm asking you what you would do.
Because I'm answering your question. This issue doesn't solve it, because under this issue, it's like what I say, that if YIMBY existed around the time that the Triangle neighborhood was being built, the Triangle would never pass the snuff. And apparently our new planning commissioner lives in the Triangle neighborhood. So if this project was under the auspices of this bill, then what was it, 90 units? Then that means then we will only, that our developers would prevent us from building more than 9 of those housing units for affordable housing. So this is about numbers. And that's one of the reasons why in the arguments that you all have been making, it hasn't been about affordable housing. It's been about more housing. And that's a trickle down approach to economics. And and like I said, I'm from Brooklyn. Trickle down didn't come from New York. Trickle down came from California. And so there's this thing about not being able to actually address the problem, actually build towards what the people need, that there are solutions for homelessness. There are solutions to solve some of the biggest problems that we have today as it relates to housing. This bill doesn't do it. All this bill does is says that the developers will have a lot more control to tell cities what to do.
Okay, so again, I'll just state that you answered my question without the answer I was looking for, I guess, which is you're telling me what it won't do, and I hear that a lot, but I'm asking you, what are cities going to do to build housing for the homeless? What is the solution then? So let's just say for a moment it's not the law. Like, what is a neighboring city? We won't name any city, but let's say a neighboring city that isn't producing its housing or meeting its RENA for low and very low income households that's opposing this bill in the same reasons that you are. What is the proposed solution for how they're going to fund and construct housing?
The proposed solution will, one of the things that California City says, one of the reasons why they don't support this bill is because they says one size does not fit all, because they have the data, they have the people on the ground to know that what San Jose faces is very different from Richmond. Where Richmond is dealing with is very different from Hollywood. That across the state, cities have different needs. And notice the interest. That's how you know that this is about developers. Is because of the emphasis on coastal lands. Because beachfront property, who doesn't want that? We know what this is. This is about trickle down housing where you're just building, and this is not about being able to address the needs of the people. And so, your question leads into a fantastic discussion. But notice that the discussion isn't really about homelessness. That this bill isn't really about homelessness. This bill is about getting the developers, because if it was about homelessness, it would require 30-40% of new homes, mixed income, mixed use homes, mixed use zones, to be allocated for affordable housing. That's not what this bill does. If anything, it limits it. And so, I understand that there is a housing crisis, but to be able to tell cities what to do, and the fact is, one of the things that's been happening a whole lot is, I'm a foster care kid, and so the foster care, there was some money being allocated to help foster care youth. What happened? We ran out of money. And that's the thing. Growing up in Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy, I saw what happened in terms of city projects, what happened when cities ran out of money, when states ran out of money. And we're already running out of money. Emeryville is already running out of money. And so where is this money going to come from? That's the question. People don't know where the money is going to come from, but the requirement through this bill remains. And that requirement is, if you don't build fast enough, we will force you to. And that is what cities are saying no to. And that is the reason why the League of California Cities opposes this.
Okay, so before you go, I'd like to just state my actual position now, I think. So I'm going to support this today. I'm going to support it because of a couple reasons. One, as I think has been elucidated, the League of California Cities has never actually proposed a solution. They've asked multiple times for the governor and the state early on to reinstate redevelopment, because redevelopment was actually the way in which cities got funding to build affordable housing for a long time. And redevelopment funds had a 20% set-aside requirement for housing, and that's what was done for it. And in fact, inclusionary law across the state was, at the time, 10%, ironically. The reality is that in the aftermath of it, similar to what we did here in Emeryville, and I would disagree that Emeryville is running out of money. I would severely disagree with that. Been the budget chair for 7 years, and we're sitting on, I think, something close to 94% of our general fund sitting in different funds allocated for it. So we're, I think, probably the bond evaluation will basically tell us. We got an A from the state auditor, and I don't think many cities did. So I would disagree with that. 7 years as the budget chair, but I would say that the reality is that we passed a affordable housing bond, and we did that because that is how you actually fund affordable housing. So I have heard cities say, and I'm the former homelessness policy director at Housing California, state advocacy organization where I ran bills to serve homeless people after I did it directly for over a decade. So it is actually about homelessness. Homelessness, there's this fake dichotomy that people have made. Like we heard a speaker earlier, like you're either a NIMBY or a YIMBY. For a lot of people who don't want to actually get into the nuance and understand the complexities, which I agree with you, like it is a very complex issue, homelessness. It isn't like cookie cutter, like you're in one camp or the other. Sure, there are people who like to play to that and speak to that and yell in the echo chambers about that, but it is everything from production to preservation to anti-displacement to services to wraparound care to shelter to many other things, to policies that actually protect people and house people and serve people. And it's a combination of those things, and I'm grateful that we've done that in our city. And passing the affordable housing bond put money into the city's coffers for the purposes of helping instigate, or that's not the right word I'm looking for, basically like spur on the construction of affordable housing. And we took city properties that were sitting vacant in our city, redevelopment assets, and we're turning them into homes for people who are working people, low-income people, seniors, disabled people, people who are aging out, transition-aged youth. I mean, we've written a couple laws with your help to literally serve communities that are not served anywhere else in this state, but will be served by the laws we've passed and the policies we've adopted. And what I find curious about the cities in the league that have opposed these legislation items in the past, they say two things typically. One, they say, you're taking away our local control. And yes, that is happening, but that's because cities haven't used it to actually do what we're doing. Most cities don't actually use the control that they still have that they could use today to actually develop affordable housing. They don't invest in social housing. They don't put a measure in front of their public and say, support this so we can build a more inclusive community the way we want, which they could do if they chose to do it, and they don't. And then the second thing is people say, this bill doesn't make affordable housing. Well, that's great. It also doesn't paint the sky purple. You know, it doesn't make the train run on time. That's not the point of the bill. The point of the bill, as Member Mora mentioned at the beginning, was to say, cities, you have local control, you have RENA set up for you, you have housing goals, and you have obligations to be contributing members of the state enterprise to housing our community and making our communities whole. Some of us are good actors and some of us are not at the city level. There's no one size fits all about that. I agree with that. There is no one size fits all about that. But the reality remains that if you aren't willing to do what is required, right, then the state has as a policy objective, it's spending money in all these other places. You have the big 13 mayors going and saying they need $1 billion+ for more homeless services. I feel like I'm on crazy pills as a person who spent my days under bridges dealing with chronically homeless people with severe mental health and addiction issues, who spent time in courts and at housing authority hearings defending people from being homeless again. The idea that we are going to spend more and more money on Band-Aids as opposed to building the hospital, which is homes. If you want to heal people who are unhoused, you have to start with a home. For some people, it requires intensive services, addiction and substance use disorder care, mental health care. It requires different things because homelessness is as unique as the people who experience it. There is no such thing as the homeless in a categorical sense. They all, as a person who lived in a car, okay, I am not the same as a person who's living on Wood Street. I'm white and I have privilege. I had an education. My reasons for being homelessness and the age at which I was homeless are vastly different than the reasons, the demographics, and the experiences of the people who are just a half mile from here right now. And we don't treat people as individuals in this discussion. We treat them as a category of people. And the same is true for this discussion with housing. It is really easy to buy into a political trope and say this is all about padding big developers' pockets. I don't have any interest in padding a big developer's pocket. I don't know a big developer personally. I don't get approached by big developers. In fact, that's literally the antithesis to what I was paid to do at Housing California. But the reality is that if cities aren't going to build housing, right, this bill doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, this bill doesn't say, oh, if you're compelled to do it because you fall out of compliance with RENA, you can only build 10%. It says that's the floor, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. It wouldn't have made our project not 90 units. And the reason SB 35 was beneficial to our housing project at 3600 San Pablo was because the developer, who's affordable, has to patch somewhere between 10 and 20 different financing streams together in most cases. And the irony in this situation is that they got accelerator funding and didn't need to do all that. But the reality is that most cases, like the transition age youth project we have at 4300 San Pablo, they'll cobble over the next 2 years many pots of money together to make that project work. And what SB 35 did for those cities that are actually interested in affordable housing, in building affordable homes, it cut the development timeline down. And time to an affordable developer is equal to savings, which made it easier for our city to finance a project. We spent less dollars per unit on the home, which means we have more money for more homes, which means more families in need being in shelter indoors. And so in a perfect ideological world, this bill would not be necessary. This bill would not be necessary because cities would do what they're supposed to do, their mandate, which is to approve housing and provide for development in their community that makes their community inclusive and equitably grows across our state. But we don't do it equitably. Cities are at all different levels of compliance with that. And so the state is looking to get cities in compliance with it. And if at the end of the day, we need tools like this that aren't even going to affect our city directly. This would not actually change what we do in Emeryville. That's the hard part that people don't get. We comply with RENA. We have a housing element that's compliant, as was noted earlier. Less than a fifth of the state is in that situation. And we have a pro-housing designation because guess what? We actually do the right things. We do prioritize and incentivize affordable housing and make it affordable to do this. This is actually aimed at other cities that leave the burden to cities like us. And so I'm all in favor of having other cities do their fair share. And if this is what that looks like, and they're upset that it doesn't have all the details, and this won't build affordable housing, this doesn't provide affordable housing, of course it doesn't. It's not intended to do that. And guess what? You haven't done it either. So it is a false narrative. It is a fake answer to what is going on with this. That is not about, sure, it's not building affordable housing, but you aren't either. Welcome to the party. Vice Mayor Welch.
I just wanted to add, of course, we all just went through our housing element process. And so in my day job, I get to investigate municipalities for their state housing law compliance. And we focused on housing elements. And let me tell you, honey, they set up many municipalities, ones who are against this bill, sat up and played around for about a year and a half and either didn't do their housing element, which is their opportunity to have local control and determine how they're going to meet their RENA numbers to their liking. That is what your housing element is supposed to do. People either sat up and didn't do it, did stuff like tried to self-certify and said, screw HCD, I'm going to just decide what we did was compliant and we're going to do it anyway. Some of them ignored complete directions from HCD, and I won't get into names, but like you cannot do a full ADU housing element. You need to figure out how to build other types of housing. So you talk about local control and okay, we're giving you an opportunity to meet these numbers. And what do people do? What does a large bulk of these cities do in California? They fool around. And now it's about time they found out, because it's been going on for decades. We're in a housing crisis, we're in a housing shortage, and that is because of local control, because communities decided that building housing wasn't a priority, okay? The paint's on the wall. That's it. This is due to the decisions that they've made over decades, as rents were climbing, as families were getting displaced, and now we are in complete triage mode. We're out of crisis. This is a state of emergency, the level of housing insecurity and homelessness we have in this state. So yes, we have to do things like streamlining. We need different bills that will address all of the issues because it has climbed over half a century. And now we're here. We're in a state of emergency. This isn't a joke. People are dying. That's it. People are dying. Do you know the life expectancy of someone who's experiencing homelessness? 50 years. 50 years old. That's the average. That means people are dying before that. And it keeps growing until we do something. So yes, it feels like, oh, the states come in and they're telling us what to do because you showed us what your priorities are for 50 years. From before then. Downzoning in Berkeley started in 1916. You've showed us what your priorities are, and now the ramifications are here, and people are literally dying and starving. So yes, someone stepped in to help mitigate the situation. So if you don't want the state all up in your business, meet your RENA numbers on your own terms. You have that opportunity. Thank you.
Member Corr.
I would like to make a comment on propose a motion. Since there is no alternative solution that was proposed when given the chance, I feel like this bill should be supported for the lack of an alternative solution. And then it seems to be only the cities who oppose this bill seem to be the one who have not met their requirements. So we are considered a model city, and as I think the mayor has pointed out, we are not even in the situation where we would have to face any kind of consequences for that. So if there is no further comment, I would like to make a motion to support SB 423.
I will recognize you. The way it works is a motion is made, a second is made, then I call for debate on the motion. Please just give me a moment. Motion by Corr and a second by Vice Mayor Welch. I recognize Member Priforce.
So thank you. I apologize for that. So what you heard was the mayor admit this isn't about homelessness. Even though that tends to be the spear that's used. Sorry, Nickelodeon, I know you got to go back and forth. It's okay. So it's this isn't about homelessness, right? This is about being able to build it faster. I've lived Emeryville for a while, and I got to know very well the unhoused encampment that was near my building at the Courtyards, 65th, for years. Got to know those folks, even allow them to gain access. Even though I know I wasn't supposed to, we have a little shower near our pool, and so I would let them shower there. And anything I could give, I'd give there. Those folks don't live in Emeryville. They were cleared out. Actually, most of the encampments in Emeryville, they were cleared out. Do those folks live in Emeryville? No, they do not. And so earlier when we talked about records, in terms of your record, Mayor, the record has actually been that great for the unhoused unhoused people. I'm learning to use my language better. Unhoused peoples in Emeryville. And so, yes, Emeryville is the model city for big real estate, for developers. We're doing everything they want us to do, and it's the reason why the Chronicle, I read your article, Councilmember Welsh, Vice Mayor Welsh, in response to the article, the San Francisco Chronicle, that called us the most YIMBY council, I believe. The most YIMBY council, most YIMBY city. Yeah, I think so. And what does that mean? That means developer control of Emeryville. You all know it. Those of you who are out there listening, watching this, you know the history of Emeryville. When I go to Sacramento, there's two things that they use to describe Emeryville that I find quite offensive. I won't say what the other one is, but the one that pops up a lot is developer-controlled Emeryville. That's what they call us. And so, so it makes sense that every bill that I have pulled has been green-lighted by the council, unanimous, 4-1, where they cater to not only just anti-democratic approaches, and in this bill specifically doesn't address homelessness, doesn't address unhoused peoples, just gets developers more power. That's what this is about. And so, I can cite my background. I can cite a whole lot of things that would make me qualified, but really, I'm not an expert when it comes to homelessness. I'm not an expert when it comes to unhoused peoples. I just know that there are people who need automatic doors to open in Emeryville, and we didn't do that. We're still trying to fight against that. That, there's package theft problems in Emeryville. Still haven't addressed some of those issues. Security, yeah. I uploaded a video of somebody in my own mailroom who got robbed at gunpoint here in Emeryville. When you talk about it being a model city, I don't think you're talking past tense. I think you're talking future tense. That Emeryville is a model city for developers to have free reign. And this bill just empowers that. So then we just want to replicate the Emeryville model to the rest of the state? Is that what we're arguing? No. That's not, I'm not arguing it. My colleagues are. And no. What's good for Emeryville is good for Emeryville. And honestly, when it comes to equity, Emeryville can be better. But I'm not going to ask San Jose to be Emeryville. I'm not going to ask Milpitas to be Emeryville. I'm not going to ask Fremont and other places to be Emeryville. You live in those cities, you have every right. And the creative use of the term local control isn't really about local control. It's about neighborhoods, your neighborhood, your voice, and how much it matters. And I believe that it matters so much so that I'm willing to stand not only with the League of California Cities, but the many unions where this bill, it kind of cuts them out of the building process, of them being allowed to be a part of the process. I mean, I think Wiener was able to squeeze one union to be a part of it. And with the right money, because he's got a whole lot of money, he may be able to get some more. But right now, there are a lot of people, a lot of cities who don't want to stand for this bill. And I stand with them.
Member Mora.
So just briefly, I do want to make it very clear in case it wasn't made clear earlier. This bill is absolutely about addressing homelessness. It's absolutely about affordable housing, and it's about getting other cities to do their part to solve those very, very big problems. It doesn't matter what else you do on homelessness. If cities are not building the necessary housing stock, then it'll come to nothing. So that's why I support this, and we should continue the vote.
Okay, is there anybody who would like to discuss further before I call for the vote? Vice Mayor Welch, you want to?
No, I just want to know what San Francisco Chronicle article was I listed in as the most YIMBY mayor? What San Francisco Chronicle article was that?
Are you asking me a question?
Yes,
Vice
I
Mayor
am,
Welch?
because you're the one that made the statement.
So you wrote a Cal's Matters article last year.
That's not the San Francisco Chronicle.
Councilmember Welch, I don't want to interrupt you, so I'm asking you not to interrupt me. So you wrote a Cal's Matter article last year. I believe it was around March, so it's about 1 year anniversary. In defense of you were a new council member, in defense of the article that came out of the San Francisco Chronicle that stated that we are the most YIMBY city council, I think either in the state or in America. I don't know, but I know that one YIMBY like Twitter account or something, out of the entire country, they had a graph. It was some sort of joke, but Councilmember Welch, you were on the graph, and Mayor Bowders, Vice Mayor Welch, and Mayor Bowders, you were on that graph. So out of all the city, can you imagine how many cities there are in America? Two of the people who are in the graph of I think was less than 25, 30 people are mentioned, are cited in that graph. And, and it just shows that the interests that exist when it comes to big real estate and the developers in Emeryville. And you know what? And I remember when I first came, into this, I believe I told Adam, the acting city manager, I said, look, I know what I'm dealing with. You know, I know I'm dealing with a very YIMBY influenced city council, and when it comes to housing stuff, I don't speak too much on it because it's, you know, like I said, I'm not an expert. I don't have a PhD or a master's degree in this stuff. But what I do know is that the argument that was used by the mayor was about defending developer profits. That when you said that we have this amount of affordable housing, and that if they don't get to be able to build and match that, they don't make as much money. And as a business person, being in a room with a lot of these folks, the difference between super duper wealthy, super wealthy, and wealthy, there is a difference. We're not hurting them. It's the difference between them being able to go, be able to afford. They're not hurting. And so, all this talk about markets and all this talk about, is usually the talk from people who don't have a business background enough to know when we're a part of a game. And that game is you, a new council member, decided to write in defense of a position that the council, that included Diane Martinez, who is now planning commissioner. I mean, wake up, folks. I mean, can we not see the writing on the wall that, this is what influence looks like? This is what big money influence looks like. And so, so I hope I answered your question. You wrote an article, a Cal Matters article, in response to another article that claimed that we are the most YIMBY council, I believe, in the state or in the country.
I recognize Vice Mayor Welch.
So you clearly didn't read the article, but I'll read the title out for everyone. Every city in California needs to do its fair share to create more housing. Guest commentary by Courtney Welch. And that kind of plays into what we're talking about right now. Everybody needs to do their share. We are a region. We are impacted by the movements or the resistance to do the right thing. Can we take a vote?
We can. There is a motion by Member Corr. It was seconded by Vice Mayor Welch to approve a position of support for Senate Bill 423. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Carr?
Aye.
Councilmember Mora?
Aye.
Councilmember Priforce? Nay. Vice Mayor Welch?
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders?
Aye. Thank you. That passes. Thank you, Nicolo, for being here. I hope the boys are tucked in bed, and send
That's why I was texting.
send my condolences to your wife.
I will. She said they're all in our bed, so I guess I'm sleeping on the couch tonight.
So
Thanks, everyone. And
I appreciate you, Nicolo, so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Get home safely, please. Item 13 is department head reports. Are there any this evening?
There are none, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item 14 is future agenda items. Are there any requests for a future agenda item? Seeing none. Item 15 is adjournment. Madam Clerk, the time is 9:44 and we're adjourned.